Today on the Cameron Journal podcast, I am joined by Aaron Taylor. He is a musician and songwriter who is incredibly popular, and has a new album out called Allow Me to Reintroduce Myself with some excellent popular hits, including Hoodie, Black Holocaust, No You Ain't, and I Only Want You. He looks like all independent and just absolutely interesting and fascinating, and I love to talk about music. So this should be good and fun and interesting. So, Aaron, welcome to the Cameron Journal podcast.
Hi, Cameron. Nice to be here.
Excellent. Well, why don't you start from the beginning? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and how you got into music, perhaps?
Okay. Well, originally I'm from Richmond, Virginia, and I grew up there. Was there for like 20 something years. And yeah, like growing up, my family was very much into music. I can recall my dad actually having like a huge record collection of everything from Stevie Wonder and Michael Jackson to Kumo D, Fresh Prince. Like he had a wide mixture of music that he listened to. And so I grew up on a lot of that stuff. And as I got older, I really got into being able to express myself by way of writing. I went to school for theater, so I was a fine and performing arts major in college, and where I got to learn how to write scripts and do story structure stuff. But in the mix of that, I was also trying to get musical stuff off the ground. And so I was a big fan of early groups like Arrested Development, a lot of the groups that my dad liked. So your Kumo D's, your LL Cool J's. And then also I was a big fan of Weird Al. Like that, he did a lot of parodying of Michael Jackson stuff, as you probably know. And I was a big Michael
Mhm.
fan, so I got to be a big fan of his. So I had a very comedic influence. I had a very rap inspired influence, R&B influence. And so as I started to try to express myself and also just entertain my family, I would start writing songs. Some were silly songs, some were songs that were, about things going on in my life. And when I got to college was when I first started thinking about actually putting together albums. Because I used to put together like on my message machine, I used to make up songs on my messaging machine, just like as the outro, like, hey, I'm not here, but it'd be like a mock parody of a song that was out. And people used to call my phone on college campuses like all the time, just listen to my messages. So in my senior year, I cobbled together some songs and I put together like some original music and put together my first album that was called Check the Resume. And I sold like several copies of that album on campus. So that was kind of like the first real insight for me that people would actually listen to my stuff if I were to sell it.
That's quite impressive. So, that's a very interesting journey to music. So, why don't we skip then forward to the album you're talking about now? How did you start? Where did the idea come from?
Okay. Well, so the album that's out now is a mixture collection of songs that I previously released along with new material. So when I moved to Atlanta in 2006, and I started putting out videos on YouTube in 2008. And in order to get myself off the ground, I started putting out a music video a week for an entire year. And by the end of that year, I'd had some success on YouTube. I had a song that went globally very popular, and it allowed me to move to California. And so between then and like I'd say 2018, 2019, I'd continued to record songs and put albums out, but a lot of them weren't on streaming services. And so just this past year, I decided to kind of revamp and start putting out my stuff on streaming. And I said, well, I have a whole bunch of albums. I want to put out like 50, 11 songs at one time. So let me just start taking from like the best of what I've put out so far and then record some new stuff and put that together for this album. And so in this album, there's a lot of songs that previously got a lot of traction and went and got popular, along with some newer material that's also taken off pretty well. So that's how this current album came together. And I'm also, and this is Allow Me to Reintroduce Myself Part One, because there's a volume two that's going to be coming out later next year with some more materials that I previously recorded, along with some newer stuff, as well as newer albums that I'm working on entirely.
How prolific of you.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, yeah. It's interesting because I've had a lot of stuff go viral and a lot of stuff get popular on YouTube. But some of the songs like were like I may have had a beat that I got from like a SoundCloud or something like that, where because I don't own it, I couldn't put it out on a streaming service. So I had to get either the completely different beat or get it restructured in a way that I could use. And then also just in my early recording journey, the recording material I had was not the best. I was a broke guy in 2008 that didn't have a lot of material, but I still wanted to record. So you know how that is, like, you're like, I just want to start. And I got a flimsy microphone and a laptop that kind of records in Windows Media Maker. I'll make it work. So now that I have better equipment, I could re-record some of those songs because a lot of them I actually produce myself. I make beats as well, but the recording material might not have been that great. So now I was able to go back and record some of those so they sound better. My voice sounds kind of the same, like it's a little bit older sounding, but it still sounds pretty similar. So I was able to put some of those songs together and put them back out. So I just wanted to have a product where the songs sounded pristine, and I knew they were based on songs that were already popular that people would gravitate towards.
No, that definitely that definitely makes a lot of sense. So I this is kind of a little kind of odd thing. So I was very late to the whole YouTube new media social media party. Um, I did not start the first iteration of this show till 2014.
Oh,
And
wow.
by that time, yes, no, exact what I said late. Like when I said late, I'm like late. Um, and I didn't even start my first real blog that would become the Cameron Journal until the same time as well,
Okay.
because I was working in nightlife and doing magazines and I wanted to be in the industry sort of thing. And I didn't understand. I mean, I'm always impressed by people like yourself who went out and like found that terrible mic and found that laptop that barely runs one program, because I wasn't even, my brain wasn't even there. Like I wasn't
Mm.
even thinking about that at all sort of thing. Um and so what was that? I mean, we're far enough distant from it now. We can talk about, the early days of YouTube and all this type of thing. What was that like being in that milieu?
Well, it's interesting because, so like I said, I moved to Atlanta in 2006. My original plan was to try to be a beat maker, and I was working a job at a restaurant. And like a year and a half in, I admit I had gone to a few parties, and I went to a TI party at one point. So I had been in a few studios here and there, but like just nothing was taking off. And so there was a musician named Jonathan Coltrane, and he did a project called A Thing a Week. And basically, he had turned 37, he had had a kid, and he wanted to show his kid that you could chase your dreams and do what you wanted to do, but he was working like a corporate job. So he got rid of the corporate job and started putting out a song a week. And he did that for a year. And his fifth song, I think, was a guitar acoustic version of Baby Got Back, which took off. And
Right.
so I don't know how I came across his page, but I saw that and was like, huh. So he just put out a song consistently every single week for a year, and he got popular. I wonder if I could repeat that and do the same thing. And so it just so happened that around that time was when YouTube had just come out. Like I think YouTube came out right after the Janet Jackson Super Bowl thing happened, because people couldn't find that footage, and so these two guys like, we should make a thing. So it was like maybe like 2 or 3 years into the YouTube thing. But at the time, like nobody thought that you could make a living off of YouTube or that people would actually see your stuff and like whatever. So I just knew that I was watching YouTube a lot, and I figured I could make a song a week because I had at that point enough equipment to kind of put some stuff together. It would allow me to show off my beats. It would allow me to show off my songwriting capabilities. And then adding the visual element, I could think of like some funny videos to put up, or I was just like, okay, what can I do to make videos? I literally got a Kodak camera from Best Buy, which at the time wasn't known for video because it took mostly pictures, but it could do videos here and there. And then yeah, I got a microphone, I had a keyboard, and I had a beat making machine, and just said, okay, with these elements here, I can make the songs. And then I got a camera now, so I can attempt to make some videos and just see what happens. And I honestly figured that because I knew there were people in college that knew that I did songs back then, that if nothing else, they'd get a kick out of it. Like my college friends would come across it and be like, oh, this guy, he's making videos now. That's so great. He used to make songs. Oh my God, that's so funny. And so that's as far out as I thought it. But I figured if I did this for a year, if Jonathan Coltrane had, he was able to go on tour and start making songs and selling albums, that the worst case scenario is I'd have a couple of songs take off and I might sell a couple of albums. And that's how as far as I thought it out. And then when I put out my fifth song, which was a reimagining of Lil Wayne's "A Milli" that was about Obama because he was running at the time, that song ended up like taking off and getting played all around the world and getting like 20, 30 million views on YouTube. And I was not prepared for that, but that opened up the door to other opportunities. Other people would see that video and hit me up to ask me to work on projects, which allowed me to end up moving out to California. So, but in terms of the YouTube stuff, like I said, I had no idea. And back then they were very they were very much policing people on like if you're using other people's beats or you're trying to sample stuff without permission. Like they didn't have it like now where it's like the people just say, okay, we're going to take your money, but you can keep the video up, you know? So I had my
Right.
YouTube channel taken down like 3 or 4 times because I would like try to sample a beat for a freestyle. Up, can't use it. Channel gone, and I had to wait to get it back up. So it was very much the wild wild west. But I was just like, I want to be a part of this. I was very creative. I knew how to make stories because of my time in theater. I liked making visual things, so it just really appealed to me in that way. And then the money making stuff like came later when they started doing partnerships and stuff. But that's not initially what I was in it for. I just wanted the exposure to show that I made beats and wrote.
Well, no, that's quite impressive. Like I said, I'm always impressed by people who hit on something like that so early on.
Yeah.
Because there were a lot of us that were not even thinking about that or on those lines or anything like that. So, how has the platform and the milieu of YouTube changed for you in that time?
I mean, YouTube. Well, I know for one thing, when YouTube started, there weren't things like algorithms, and at the time, I think they hadn't yet been bought by Google. And at the point that they got bought by Google was really when like you started seeing things like YouTube videos with ads in them, and then people being able to get monetized and all that stuff. So it was very very different because you could go on YouTube and watch stuff and put up stuff, and there wasn't all these interruptions. And now it seems like people like it seemed like people back then were making content because they just really wanted to just show something and be visual and get their opinion out. And it's kind of like that now, but a lot of it's more geared towards what can I do to make the algorithm like me enough for people to watch my stuff. And so sometimes you get bad actors and people that are just saying things or doing things in an attempt to try to get people to watch that they don't necessarily mean. So I think it was a little bit more genuine back then. It was just about, showing yourself off and just trying to, entertain people. But that doesn't make it bad. It just makes it different. So you kind of have to know going in, okay, like when I'm thinking of songs or videos, I always come from the purest place of like, what's going to entertain me first? Because if nobody else likes it, I want to listen to it. I want to put it on streaming and hear it and be able to like it. But I also kind of gear towards, okay, but if I have this thought for an idea, in what ways can I maybe add a couple of things in that are in the zeitgeist now? Or if I'm thinking of a video idea, what kind of video can I put out there that's going to really grab people's attention and make them want to watch or hear the message that I have to say? And so, but that's always been true of anything that involves like music and marketing and stuff like that. You kind of have to think beyond yourself, think about the people that are consuming this outside of me. What do they want to see and hear? And then how can I do that in an authentic way that's still going to have the most amount of people like it?
No, no, certainly. It's funny you talk about samples and all this type of thing. I feel like the younger generation, especially, I mean, it's hard to say a genre because it's also blended now in a way that it didn't used to be. But
True.
my God, I think it's gotten a lot of control. I'm kind of like, I'm like, Ava Max, your whole career is just singing over 80s music. Like, is LA entirely bereft of anyone with original idea? Like, I mean,
Pretty
it's
much.
like, I mean, it's just kind of everything, and maybe it's just because I'm getting old, but everything seems so derivative now. Like, I don't know, how do you feel about that?
Well, it's funny because I grew up. My era of hip hop was primarily the '90s, and the '90s was sampling stuff from the '70s and '80s. And now, as an older gentleman, I now hear songs being sampled from songs that were sampled back when I was listening to hip hop or really getting into it. So it's like we're
Yeah.
now like double, triple, quadruple sampling stuff. And hey, as a person that has done like his own like reimagining of things, I it's not that I'm completely not appreciative of it, but I kind of like when it's done in a different style or when it's not just like, hey, let's take the beat and then just make it the exact same beat. Like if you take the beat, you remix it, add some horns to it, or you add some like original sounds to it, then for me, it's just like, okay, that's pretty entertaining because that's not me just like I'm going to already guess what you're going to say based on the sample that you use that I've heard 100 different times. People that are just taking songs and just being like, I'm just going to do it over again. To me, that's lazy, but also they might be looking at the market. And I know like it's kind of like out here in Hollywood, there's a lot of remakes that get done. Hollywood and music companies at large are just looking at the bottom line. Like it's like, okay, we just want to make money. So are there any beats out there that have worked in the past that could probably work again? So for example, like Shabuzi, he's had a number one hit now for 15 weeks called a bar song, Tipsy. And
Yes.
Tipsy was a song that came out in 2004 that was a number two hit. And I never thought I'd hear from that guy, Jay Quan, again. But now, lo and behold, you got a sample, it came out, and now it's like the number one song in the country. So there's something to be said for like the record labels and even like artists themselves on some level understand the game, which is like, okay, if I got to take a sample that people can recognize and then put my spin on it to get popular, I'll do that. And then hopefully they'll follow me along for the other stuff that is more original. And sometimes it works, and sometimes they get that one hit off that original that sample that they used, and then that's all they get. So it's a mixed bag. But I understand like getting popular music, getting popular movies. It's very complicated, and so the easier you can make that, the better. But I do think it steals from the originality of all this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a bit of a void of new and creative ideas in culture everywhere.
Yeah.
Um, Movies, obviously, I think are the most guilty. They're the worst. They're the most guilty
Oh yeah.
party of not having how Hollywood hasn't had an original idea in 20 years at this point.
True.
Um,
True.
and so, and I think, but I also feel like music is starting to suffer the same thing. And I think I don't know how you feel about this. I think part of it is because record labels don't develop careers anymore. We have the same thing in literature. So I am primarily a writer, and a lot of name brand authors whose names you would recognize would have never had careers in today's environment because it took time to shepherd them. Most debut novels don't do very well. And it oftentimes takes an editor who really believes in somebody to develop them over time. And artist development is gone as far as I can tell in the music industry. What do you think about that?
Well, it's interesting because the two of the most popular artists now that are out are Chappell Roan and Sabrina Carpenter, and
Yeah.
both of them had like a long cycle leading up to them getting popular. I think Sabrina Carpenter's was like 10 years. So on the one hand, there is an element still of like artists that are going through the cycle of like development and giving them time to breathe and build up an authentic audience and get hits made. But I think, to your point, overall, it's like a lot of record companies are going to TikTok and are like, okay, who's like the who's like the flavor of the week? Who's got like a sound out that we can use and then exploit? And it's sad because with artist development, you get things like, let's say you have a public scandal. How do you handle that? Somebody that's gone through the ringer would know, okay, we've taught you how to deal with tough questions. We've taught you, how to show up at certain places, how not to just lash out at things or to just put any old thing on the internet that could get you canceled. And that's where the development part happens, is because most people aren't well versed in publicity, aren't well versed in like actually going out there and talking to people beyond just their circle. And I think that gets lost. And that's probably why a lot of careers also are much shorter now, because like, look at the baby. Like I imagine the baby had no training, and then he had that concert where he said the thing. And as much as he's tried, he's not been able to come back to that. And he didn't have anybody in the circle that could teach him like the ins and outs of like what that would be like. Because again, there's no arts development. It's just, hey, I'm hot. I can put a beat up and a song up on SoundCloud now and get popular. And there's so much value in being able to have people in your corner that can actually teach you things about the industry and about publicity and marketing and about people before you come out. And people are getting punished for that. And it's sad because there are a lot of people that have a lot of good talent, but they make the wrong mistake, they say the wrong thing, they do the wrong thing, they cater to the wrong audience, and then next thing you know, they're gone.
Yes, yes, no. I mean, it is a huge. I mean, I think that's a huge problem. I mean, a really quite massive, massive problem. And yes, when you talk about careers being a lot shorter than they used to, that's I think the thing I miss the most is longevity. As
Yeah.
Mariah Carey always talks about it when everyone asks her, "Oh, is this the new?" And she's kind of like, "Call me in a decade and see if they're still here," because there's a
Yeah.
lot of people that will come and go, sort of thing. And you get and this and people kind of talk about, oh, the one hit wonder. I'm kind of like, there were a lot of one hit wonders as the years went by, but back in the day, labels would keep someone on because there was an audience there, sort of thing, and you may only know them for that one song, but they still did a whole bunch of albums and retired happy
Oh
and all
yeah.
this type of thing. One Helen Reddy comes to mind when I think about that. Never really was that popular. If you say that in a crowd, most people won't know who she is. Um, Sort of thing. But I mean, she had actually a quite nice career. If I were her, I wouldn't be sad about what I did, even though
Sure.
I didn't necessarily become Cher, sort of thing, or anything like that.
Right, right, right.
But I do think it is a bit of a churn and burn situation these days.
And it's sad because like I on YouTube I watched this there's a guy named Todd in the Shadows, and he does a lot of like music reviews, but he has a series on there called One Hit Wonderland, where he looks
Yeah.
at artists that only had the one hit and then what happened after. And so it's amazing to see, like, when I watch that show, he'll say, okay, this is the hit that they had. He'll do some commentary on it, and then it'll be like, what happened next? And a lot of those one hit wonders still had like 3 or 4 albums that came out before their label dropped them. So they still had
Yeah.
additional like 5 to 7 years in the system. And then you talk about nostalgia, because that one hit wonder might fall off. They might get dropped by the label. And then like 10 years later, all of a sudden, like their song gets used in a commercial or gets used in Stranger Things, and boom, they're back out there. And now they now have
Yeah.
a longer career because people just want to hear that hit. And they'll go there to hear the 5 or 6 songs they got to get through to hear that one hit. But
Yeah.
again, this goes to record labels were able to respect that a bit more back in the day. Whereas now it's like, I mean, we might see you in 5 years, but we don't really care. You had the one hit, we got the money off you, get out of here, you're good.
Yeah. No, but I think I now here's where I think, for some people, I think here's kind of the double-edged sword of social media is I think social media can definitely give people a second life, being able to develop their own audiences and followings and all this type of thing for those that choose to do it, sort of thing. But to your point, it also becomes a huge vector of liability. Wrong post, say the wrong thing, all this type of thing, low scandal sort of thing. Um, so what is your experience with social media, Ben? What do you I have developed a bit of a negative view of social media. Because on the
Okay.
one hand, it is responsible for the entirety of everything you see before you. It is the
Facts.
reason why I exist, the reason why I ever had a career, because magazines and things were not interested in me. And I always struggled with that, which is why I did my own thing.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, it's like it's been good to me, but on the other hand, I also see what it's done to society, what it's
Mm.
done to people, all this type of thing, and it's quite sad. So as someone who was in it many, many years before I was, how do you what do you think about all that?
Well, it's funny because I think we're like the last generation where social media didn't exist, because
Yes.
like I was in college when we got Facebook in like 2004, I want to say. And then we kind of had MySpace around the same time and stuff like that. So when I was in my younger years, actually, when I put my videos on YouTube, I would also put my songs and stuff on MySpace, and I was able to grow that way. So for me, social media has always been like a great tool to use if you're going to market the things you're trying to do to make money. Anything outside of that, it's kind of like, what is the purpose? Like, you're putting up stuff to show family and friends, you can FaceTime them. They don't, you ain't got to be publicly put it out there on a platform, people to see your
Right.
personal thoughts about stuff. But now a lot of it just seems like theater. Like anytime I see somebody on YouTube, or I see somebody like TikTok or Instagram, and they got a video where they're crying about something, I just think to myself, they had to take 5 minutes to set up that camera and the lighting to be able to cry like this all of a sudden. Like, it just seems very fake. So I think if social media is being used in the right way, people can use it to make money. They can use it to advertise their music, their movie projects. They can use it to, like, if they're trying to be a lifestyle influencer, fine. Talk about the things you buy, the things that you're making to try to sell. I think it's very, very good for that. I think outside of that, I mean, and there's an entertainment portion also, but it does make us lazy. Like, at the end of the day, us sitting there scrolling all the time, it takes us away from our purpose, and it takes us away from being able to actually create. I mean, even I'm a YouTube fan still. There are days where I have to be like, look, dude, you got to get off YouTube and make a video, record a song, because it really does slow down that process for people. And I think it's designed to do that. I think it's designed to keep us lazy, so the people at large that are making all this money can keep making the money and not have to share it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's one of the things I complain about the most of social media is you have basically a duopoly of advertising where Facebook and Google control 97% of advertising in the United States.
Yep.
And quite frankly, there's those of us who actually make the content on which their platforms rely are are absolutely frozen out. Facebook you know was supposed to share its advertising revenue with news providers in Australia, and instead of paying the money they just decided to no longer show news in Australia,
Oh
which I
yeah.
thought
Yeah.
was rather disingenuous. And I've always said you have two choices, Facebook. You can either A, give us back our audiences so that we can get them to click and get ad revenue, or you can give us a share of the money. But you have to choose. You
Yeah.
cannot keep basically exploiting us forever and ever just because for stuff to get seen, but you're making all the money. And it's I the sad thing is I never those discussions never seem to ever quite go anywhere. I've
Yeah.
noticed. I've been very disappointed at a governmental level that there hasn't been more of a push um for that. But I think part of it is because it doesn't affect the average person. The average person does not care whether you and I get paid for what we do or not. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people think it's very silly that what we do anyway. And, it's sort of be kind of like yeah, that's cute, get a real job sort of thing. So I
Mm.
don't, I mean, so, but the sad thing, but here's the sad thing is you have these two companies making billions because you and I do what we do. And if we all stopped at once, Facebook would
Yeah.
be in
It'd be
trouble. I mean,
over.
yeah, I mean, literally 90% of content on the internet is made by 10% of the users. Like, so, if I'm Mark Zuckerberg, I would be very concerned if every, reasonably creative person decided to pack it up one day because his
Mm.
platform essentially would cease to be dynamic. It would be over. Sort
But
of
that's the thing,
things.
those people know that we're inherently lazy, and they know we're lazy, and they know that there's always going to be more people coming up that don't know better and will create content. So, for example,
Yes.
like we could push for, hey, let's all whatever, but like the reality is people are sitting home and it's like, I don't want to do that. I want to sit here and scroll. And then if we all creatively stop, I know there are people that are younger than me that are up and coming. Like I just went to homecoming this past weekend from my college, and they got a theater program there with new people. They got a media department, and they're all excited to make content. If we die out, they will come right in and they will keep making the
Yep.
money on Facebook and Google. So it's like, how do you stop that system when there's always up and comers that are like, they don't want to do it, I'll do
Yeah.
it. You know?
Yeah. No, and it basically it makes it so that these companies can continue to get away with this with no consequences because there's never going to be that unified pushback, you
Yeah.
know, sort of thing. I remember years, and I wrote a thing about this on the Karen Drill at the time. Hank Green came out and said, for the internet to really work and for to really pay people, we have to have $1,000, made per hour of viewing content. And I
Mm.
said, your math's not wrong, but that will never happen, ever because there's no
Yeah.
exclusivity. That works on television because there's exclusivity. There's a finite number of channels. There is, even though it's quite large, a finite number of shows. The
Yeah.
internet doesn't suffer from that problem for exactly what you're talking about. For every
And
1,000 people that may decide not to do something or quit and give up, there's 5,000 behind them, ready to
yep.
go, sort
And
of
then and
thing.
that's not even talking about AI, because like we had a whole strike in Hollywood last year where about that, but
Yes.
it's like even though they're like, oh, we're gonna make sure that AI doesn't take AI is already taken over. Like James Earl Jones is dead. His voice as Darth Vader will be used forever, and he signed on for
Yes.
that. So it's not hard to imagine like a lot of these people are like, hey, before you die, real quick, we're gonna make you sign this contract, and if they can make it part of the studio system, like, hey, if you die, we still own you. If you decide you're doing like the Avengers and you're Iron Man and you die out, we want to be able to use your likeness. Like, just sign this contract. Like, a lot of people are gonna not get jobs off of AI. So again, even if people decide to leave, they can just make people now. You know?
Yeah. No, it's a very difficult thing. It's a very difficult thing. So where does that leave you, given all that we've talked about, where does that leave you as a creative person? I know you have these new albums coming out and all this type of thing, but what are you working on? What inspires you? How do you feel about all this? Is it hard to continue? Because sometimes I get a little,
It's funny because I was thinking the other day that like, there's times when I've not made a single dime off of anything that I've made. And then there's been times where I had the potential to make money off of something that I was going to make. And in either of those cases, the money itself wasn't the thing that motivated me. It was the fact that I have a need to create. I have a need to have an outlet, whether it's making a video, writing a song, putting together. I used to do skits out here with some of my friends. Like we have a whole skit channel. At the end of the day, it's like the creative process doesn't go away just because there's new things added. If anything, it can enhance, like, oh, AI, this is a green screen AI backdrop right here. Like, it's like I can use creativity to be able to still, help me on my journey and do things without it taking over what I do. Because at the end of the day, like AI can't write like me. And I know they're saying like, oh, you can train AI, this and that. Trust me, you can't. Like, because AI doesn't have the means to suddenly think differently. Like, I could think one way about something, and then the next day think differently. Doesn't have the capacity to change its mind once you've taught it a way to think. And so that goes to how I write songs. My writing style has always been different in a way where I can't imagine AI being able to perfectly replicate the style that I do, because depending on what I'm talking about, I might use certain words or phrases or change it up or switch flow patterns or switch, how my accent is or switch the way I'm doing a chorus that AI has yet to mimic. Hey, maybe they'll invent it someday. Maybe I'm wrong right now and they'll invent it in like 20 years. It can actually do that. But right now, that's not really the case. And then even with AI, the fact that you have to teach it how to do a thing means that your brain still has to function better than the AI that you're teaching in order to learn a fraction of what you can do. So
Right.
I'm not threatened by that too much. Again, and this for me, I get personal satisfaction of doing all this stuff, which is why I continue to do it, whether I'm getting paid millions of dollars or I'm getting just, the satisfaction of, oh, I put out a video. Oh, this is amazing.
No, no, that's very good. I think that's an excellent way to last in doing it and have that personal sort of thing with it. I have never had that, so I appreciate those that do.
Yeah.
Um, and so people are always kind of was kind of like, oh, it's like it must be so coming out. Like, actually, I don't actually like writing that much. Really, truly, I don't.
Hey,
It
I
takes
don't
too
like
many.
editing that much, and I do it anyway. Like
No,
it's
like
like a
it
means to an
takes too
end.
long. It's very time consuming. It's extremely tedious. That's why I mean, when I write music, it's always amazing that I can sit down and in 3 or 4 hours, I have something. When I'm writing a book, 3 or 4 hours, I could end up with nothing or
Yeah.
nothing usable or all this type of thing.
Or yeah, you scrap it
Um,
all. Like,
yes. I mean, or it's kind of like well, had a long writing session. How much did you achieve? I'm kind of like a couple paragraphs, honestly. Sort of, it didn't really get that far. It's like, yeah, I got part of this one chapter sort of done over here ish. Maybe nothing worth talking about. Next subject. And so I found it very kind of, and even when I'm writing content for the Cameron Journal or whatever have you, it's like, yeah, there's that 1,200 word article sort of thing, and that was all lovely, and it was nice to be able to talk about that sort of thing. But what did I get out of it? Absolutely nothing. So I always appreciate people when they come on the show and they talk about how much it really fulfills them at a personal level, because I've never had that. So I enjoy seeing other people, because it
yeah.
means it'll all, that will always go on and will always be there. So it's a very good thing. Well, we're coming to the part of the show where we do plugs. So why don't you let us know where we can find you online and listen to this great new music?
Okay. Well, primarily you can you can go to I have a link tree link. It's linktr.ee/APT songs. That's where you'll find the links to my YouTube channel, the links to all the streaming platforms that you can find my new album, Allow Me to Reintroduce Myself, Volume 1. And you can also go to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/APT songs. You can go follow me on Instagram at PhilBTrippin. But yeah, you can find all my stuff on those various platforms. I'm constantly trying to put out new stuff. I got a TikTok account, TikTok.com/APT songs as well. But that's primarily most of the time on YouTube and in my Instagram. So you can find me on those. But again, go to the link tree. You'll find links to like everything you want to see about me as pertains to like my music and output and stuff like that. And so my new album, Allow Me to Reintroduce Myself, Volume 1 is currently out. And I'm currently working on a couple of other projects. Volume 2 will be out sometime next year. I also have a passion project album that I've been wanting to put out forever and a day that I'm trying to start getting producers and stuff together for. But yeah, I'm always working on stuff, whether it's, as I said, whether it's albums or music videos. I put in an album like 5 years ago that was because 5 years ago it was the 15th year reunion of when I graduated from college. And so I put out a mixtape that was all about stuff involving our school. And so this year was my 20th year. I just put out a video for one of the songs from that album. Just again, that's one of those, like, my alma mater enjoys it. They get a kick out of it. Whether anybody else watches it or not, like, that video was made with love for my school and love for the people that I went to school with. So that just got put out like yesterday. Yeah, so like I said, I'm always working on stuff.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Cameron Journal podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate the invite, and this has been great.
That's all for this episode of the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Visit us online at CameronJournal.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I love to talk to my followers and listeners, so please feel free to get us on social media at Cameron Cowan on Twitter, and we'll see you next time on the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you.